So yes, can you see the screen now? All right, great. Okay, so let's correct from where we left in the previous session. The documentation, as we mentioned, that the documentation is first part of the QAIP, and then develop, implement, and maintain is actually the process or the mechanism from where it will be clear that the QAIP is also functioning. And in that case, conformance statement can be used, right? So a quick note on the conformance aspect, that this is a practical approach, you can say, and maybe ask in the exam that how it will be clear that the QAIP is being implemented, or how well the QAIP is functioning. This may be the question in the exam. So the evidence of that is planning memo. So I will go back. See, there are different phases here. In short, you have to maintain the documentation at each phase. For example, in the planning phase, you have the planning memo, a written planning memo, how you are going to approach that particular audit, right? So if you have this planning memo, it means this can be used as an evidence of the QAIP, Quality Assurance and Improvement Program. And then there is RCM, risk control matrix. Then there is internal audit report, and then there is follow up emails and documentation and everything related to that. I just highlighted the main documents here, right, which are used. In between there may be certain meetings or understanding meetings, right, or the confirmation meetings. So the minutes of the meetings will also serve as the documentation or the evidence that we also conducted, for example, process understanding meeting or PUD, process understanding documentation, and then we did another clarification meeting. Then we have process flow chart, for example. We developed a process flow chart and shared with them so that we understand the process thoroughly before we start the work, right? So these are some of the other, you can say, supplemental evidences that we have done the planning properly. So this will be seen as an evidence of the QAIP or functioning QAIP. Clear?
Yes.
The last concept on this topic is, if there is non-conformance, we touch this area slightly in our first or second class, that if there is non-conformance, there are certain things which should be documented. The first one is the standard, which is not met. Which standard did we not follow, or which standard which we did not comply with? So that standard or reference to that standard will be documented. The other point is circumstances. What is the context or the circumstances because of that we did not meet that standard? What are the actions taken on that? If we did not meet the standard, what alternative actions we took? There could be certain scenarios where a standard may not be applicable. For example, in certain economies, or in certain, for example, regulations, the company's law or the country's regulations are such that the standard cannot be applied, right? So for example, here we will mention the standard. I am now giving the example of each of these area. So we will mention, for example, standard ABC or 2 point, and why this was not met, because the legislation does not allow, or the standard is going against the legislation, and what are the actions taken to cover the risk if we are not following this. So these are action A, B and C which we have taken to cover this area. Then what is the impact of not following this standard, we will document that. Okay. And the last one is rationale. So rationale again is similar to the circumstances why we have not followed the standard and what we have used instead of that standard, right? In case if a standard is not conformed, so non-conformance should be maintained in this way: 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So these are the elements which should be noted in case of non-conformance. Clear?
Is the point number 2 circumstances and the rational, isn't it the same?
Yeah, it could be same, yes. So now moving to the last topic of this area, identify appropriate disclosure of non-conformance with the IIA standards. So point number 7, we already covered the QAIP. According to new IIA standards, we covered this area again. And now we are covering point number 8. So in this way, our section A will be fully completed today, and I will just wait for your queries and questions on this section, and we will move forward in the next few section B. Yes, so quickly, KPI is key performance indicator. This is the same thing which we take from the functions while we are auditing them. So we must have also the key performance indicators for our functions, right? So we can know that whether our function is also meeting the requirements of the standards plus the organizational requirements. The standard here is 12.2 performance measurement, and it requires the chief audit executive that he must develop objectives to evaluate the internal audit function's performance. The chief audit executive must consider input and expectations of the board and senior management when developing the performance objectives. So yes, when we are developing the performance objectives, input must be sought. The standard is saying must. Input must be sought by the board and senior management. And as you all know that the KPIs of the internal audit function or the CAE are approved by the board or the audit committee, right? So before approval, their input and their advice is compulsory. So the KPIs can be quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative simply means the KPIs which can be expressed as numbers, and qualitative means the KPIs which cannot be expressed in numbers but can be expressed in other ways, right? So quantitative, for example, means number of audits. I'm just giving example. It could vary according to the organization. Number of audits completed against the audit plan. Very common KPI, right? For example, there were 5 audits and we completed 4. So 4 out of 5 is the quantitative measure. Then number of findings, another common KPI. How many findings did we highlighted during this quarter or this year? Then number of audits completed. Yes, this could also be in percentage, by the way. Percentage of audit plan completion. So it could be expressed in different terms. Then average time to complete an audit. How many man days we took to complete an audit. Clear? So these are some of the examples of quantitative. Qualitative aspect is a measure which focuses on non-quantifiable data. Examples include questionnaires, surveys, which we do at the end. It may be done during the engagement, but usually these are done at the exit meeting or after the exit meeting once the internal audit report has been issued. A formal feedback or the questionnaire or the surveys are circulated to the auditee to get their feedback and improve the internal audit activity or the efficiency or effectiveness in the future engagements. Or it could take the form of interviews, direct interviews from the CEO, from the process owner. So these are some methods of quantitative and qualitative KPIs. And as you know that there is scoreboard approach in which there are 4 quadrants. So those scoreboards can also be used to develop KPIs. Some other key matrices used. One is financial, the other one is operational, third one is quality, fourth one is productivity, efficiency and effectiveness. So around these elements the matrices can be developed. So these are some of the matrices against which the internal audit performance criteria can be developed. Clear?
Yes. Just one question here, Anabhai. We discussed here that CAE must consider the input to develop the KPIs for the internal audit function, right?
Yeah.
Now, is it for the internal department as a whole, or for individual internal auditors or the internal audit staff like employees?
Okay, so here it is talking about the internal audit function specifically, and it should always start by that way. For example, function KPIs and the individual KPIs are same, right? The KPIs should follow the mission and vision and see how those are linked with the internal audit strategy and how we can develop the KPIs for internal audit function, which ultimately provides support or assurance towards the company's or entity's objectives, right? So we should develop those KPIs. Then those KPIs must be shared with the board and the senior management for their input, so that they have another pair of eyes to validate those KPIs and see if there is any mismatch between the organization strategy and priorities and the internal audit KPIs. That is why the standard is saying must share with the board and senior management. And practically we also do that, by the way. And then it will be approved and then implemented. And then those should be cascaded to the individual team members. But ultimately they should sum up towards these KPIs which the board has approved.
So in case, because I still remember there is a question in which there is a slight, the question asked about yani, who is responsible for this. For example, if the CAE or let's say the, you can say like internal audit manager or the supervisor, right? So if when we talk about the staff level, that also stays with the CAE.
Yes. Staff level stays with the CAE, but if the question is talking about the KPIs of the function, then it will go between the CAE and the board and the senior management. If the question focuses on the team, then it will ultimately be the supervisor or the CAE or the manager, whatever the question scenario is. Clear?
Yes.
So this was today's session. I hope you have enjoyed today's session, and if you have any question on the KPIs, you are free to ask anything. Do you have any question on KPIs?
Thank you. It's clear for me. Maybe when I do some questions, it will.
Okay, thank you guys for today's time, and see you inshallah next Saturday.